As she didn't know I chose her, not loudly, not dramatically. I chose her in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain, when love was not applause but patience. I chose her in a world that teaches us to keep options open, hearts guarded, and feelings temporary. While others were busy proving their worth, I was learning how to stay. While the world rushed, I slowed down, because love, real love, doesn't compete, it commits. She didn't know I chose her every day on the days she doubted herself, on the days she felt unseen, on the days she thought she was too much or not enough. I chose her not because she was perfect, but because she was real, because her presence felt like home, not excitement, peace. And this is not a story about being noticed. It's a story about choosing someone silently, deeply, and completely, without asking for credit, without demanding recognition, without ever needing her to know that my heart had already decided. I chose her long before she ever noticed the weight of my silence. Not the kind of silence that hides, but the kind that stands steady, like a shadow that never leaves even when the light changes. I chose her in the ordinary hours, when nothing romantic was happening, when there were no words crafted to impress, when love had no audience. She didn't know I chose her because I never announced it. I never turned it into a performance. I didn't need her to look at me differently. I only needed to look at her honestly. In a world where love is often loud and desperate to be seen, I let mine stay quiet because quiet things tend to be true. I watched her exist in her natural rhythm. The way she laughed without checking who was listening, the way she carried her doubts gently as if she didn't want them to disturb anyone else, the way she kept showing up even when she was tired. I didn't fall for a perfect version of her. I fell for the pauses between her words, for the way she stayed kind when the world gave her reasons not to be, for the strength she didn't recognize in herself. Choosing her wasn't a decision made in one dramatic moment. It was 1,000 small decisions, repeated daily, without ceremony. She didn't know I chose her on the days she felt invisible. On the days she questioned her worth, I saw it clearly. On the days she pulled back, I stayed patient. Loving her meant understanding that not everything needs to be explained, that sometimes presence speaks louder than promises. I chose her by listening more than I spoke, by learning her silences instead of demanding her words, by standing still when it would have been easier to walk away. I didn't choose her because it was easy. I chose her because love isn't supposed to be convenient. Love is supposed to be intentional. It asks you to stay when distractions are plenty, to focus when the world encourages you to look elsewhere. I chose her in a time where options are endless, but commitment feels rare. While others were keeping doors open, I was quietly closing mine, not out of fear, but out of certainty. She didn't know I chose her when she was unsure of herself, when she felt she was asking for too much simply by wanting to be understood. I never saw her needs as a burden. I saw them as trust. I chose her when she spoke about her dreams with hesitation, as if apologizing for wanting more. I chose her when she doubted her own beauty, because I saw it in the way she cared, in the way she tried, in the way she loved without calculation. I never tried to own her. Choosing her didn't mean controlling her or shaping her into something that suited me. It meant accepting her fully without conditions. It meant loving her freedom as much as her closeness. I chose her by respecting her space, by trusting her strength, by believing she didn't need to be fixed to be loved. Love, to me, was never about possession. It was about protection without confinement. She didn't know I chose her when I defended her in rooms she wasn't in, when I corrected misunderstandings without turning them into arguments, when I stayed loyal in my thoughts, not just my actions. Loyalty begins in the mind long before it shows up in behavior. I chose her in the way I thought about her when she wasn't around, in the way I never entertained comparisons, in the way my heart didn't wander even when no one would have known. I chose her through consistency, not through grand gestures, but through reliability, through being the same person on easy days and difficult ones, through staying calm when emotions ran high, through choosing understanding over ego. I never wanted to impress her for a moment. I wanted to be someone she could trust for a lifetime. Even if she never realized that was what I was doing, she didn't know I chose her in the moment she pushed people away. I recognized that as fear, not rejection. I stayed gentle when she was guarded. I didn't rush her healing. I didn't demand access to parts of her she wasn't ready to share. I chose patience over pressure. Love grows best when it's not forced. I chose her even when she didn't choose herself. When she minimized her own value, I held it steady. When she felt replaceable, I knew she wasn't. I never needed her to earn my love. It wasn't a reward, it was a decision. One that didn't change with her mood, her flaws, or her fears. She didn't know I chose her on the days I said nothing at all, when silence felt safer than explanation, when my care didn't require validation. I learned that love doesn't always need to be understood to be real. Sometimes it just needs to be loyal. I chose her knowing there were no guarantees, knowing love is always a risk, but some risks feel like home. Some choices feel aligned with who you are, not who you're trying to be. Loving her wasn't about filling a void, it was about sharing space, walking beside, not ahead, standing with, not above. She didn't know I chose her every morning. I woke up with the same intention, to be kind, to be steady, to be present, not because I was perfect, but because I was committed. Love isn't measured by intensity alone, it's measured by endurance. I chose her in the way I let go of other possibilities without resentment, in the way my heart stopped searching once it recognized her. Not because she was the only option, but because she was the right one. There's a difference between settling and deciding. I decided. She didn't know I chose her when I imagined a future that wasn't loud or flashy, but peaceful. A future built on trust, shared silence, mutual respect. A future where love didn't need constant reassurance because it was rooted in action. I chose her because loving her felt honest. Because with her, I didn't need to perform or pretend. I could be quiet and still be enough. I could be flawed and still be chosen. In choosing her, I also chose the version of myself that was patient, grounded, and real. She didn't know I chose her in the moments I let things go. When I chose harmony over being right, when I valued connection over control. When I understood that love isn't about winning, it's about staying connected even when opinions differ. I chose her in the unseen ways, in prayers I never spoke aloud, in hopes I kept private, in sacrifices that didn't need acknowledgement. Love for me was never about being thanked, it was about being true. She didn't know I chose her even when she believed she was hard to love. Her found her difficult. I found her human, and that was enough. I chose her without needing her to know, because real love doesn't demand recognition. It exists whether it's seen or not. It stays even when it's unspoken. It remains even when misunderstood. Choosing her was not something I did once, it was something I did every day, quietly, fully, without conditions. I loved her without asking for permission from the world, without checking if the timing was right or if the conditions were perfect. I loved her in a way that didn't interrupt her life, didn't demand attention, didn't insist on being felt. She didn't know I chose her because my choice was never meant to weigh on her. It was meant to hold her quietly, the way the ground holds someone who stands on it without ever thinking about what keeps them upright. I learned her patterns the way you learn a familiar road, slowly, naturally, without trying to memorize. I noticed how her voice changed when she was tired, how her eyes softened when she felt safe, how she became quieter when something hurt her. I never rushed to fix those moments. I stayed present inside them. Loving her meant understanding that not every ache needs a solution. Sometimes it just needs to be witnessed. She didn't know I chose her on the days she was distant, when her mind was somewhere else, when her replies were shorter, when her energy wasn't what it used to be. I never took those moments personally. I knew people don't pull away because they don't care, they pull away because they're carrying something heavy. I chose her by not adding to that weight. I chose her when it would have been easier to choose myself, when ego wanted reassurance, when pride wanted clarity, when fear wanted answers immediately. I chose patience instead. I chose to trust what I felt even when I couldn't prove it. Love isn't built on constant confirmation. It's built on faith that survives silence. She didn't know I chose her in the way I spoke about her when she wasn't there. I never reduced her to a story, never turned her into a topic for entertainment. I protected her name. I protected her dignity. I protected the parts of her that trusted me, even if she never knew they were safe with me. I chose her knowing that loving deeply always means risking quietly. There was no guarantee she would ever see me the way I saw her, no promise that my choice would be returned. But love that's real doesn't wait for safety, it moves forward, honestly, even when the outcome is uncertain. She didn't know I chose her when she felt replaceable, when she assumed everyone was temporary. I never saw her as a phase. I saw her as a presence, something steady, something that didn't fade when the excitement settled. Choosing her meant choosing depth over novelty, meaning over momentary thrill. I chose her in restraint, in what I didn't say, in what I didn't demand, in the way I let her grow at her own pace. I never tried to pull her closer than she was ready to come. I trusted that anything forced doesn't last. Love that stays is love that allows. She didn't know I chose her in the way I adjusted myself, in the way I softened my reactions, in the way I became more attentive, more grounded, more deliberate. Loving her made me quieter inside. It made me listen more. It made me aware of the space between words. I chose her without trying to be exceptional. I didn't want to be unforgettable for a moment. I wanted to be dependable over time. Anyone can be intense briefly. Very few can be consistent gently. I wanted to be someone whose presence felt calm, not confusing. She didn't know I chose her on the days she questioned love itself, when she wondered if people ever really stay. I stayed without making a speech about it. I stayed in the background of her life, not interfering, not disappearing, just there. I chose her by not keeping score, by not measuring effort, by not comparing what I gave to what I received. Love isn't a transaction. The moment you start calculating, you stop loving and start negotiating. I never negotiated my care. She didn't know I chose her when she showed me her flaws, when she wasn't at her best, when she was irritable, insecure, unsure. Those moments didn't push me away. They made her human to me, and humanity was never a deal breaker. I chose her with acceptance, not the kind that tolerates, but the kind that embraces. I never needed her to be softer, louder, stronger, or different. I didn't love her potential, I loved her reality. Potential is an idea, reality is a commitment. She didn't know I chose her in my solitude, in moments when I could have filled the silence with someone else's presence. I didn't. My heart wasn't empty, it was occupied. Even when I was alone, I wasn't searching. I chose her by letting go of fantasies that didn't include her, by allowing my future to reshape itself around her existence, not forcefully, naturally, like water adjusting its path around stone. She didn't know I chose her when I learned her boundaries and respected them without resentment. I never took her limits as rejection. I took them as self-respect. Loving her meant honoring where she ended, not pushing past it. I chose her in the way I forgave quietly, in the way I didn't hold on to minor wounds, in the way I valued peace more than being right. Love that lasts isn't fragile, but it is gentle. She didn't know I chose her in the way I stayed emotionally, available even when it wasn't reciprocated equally. I didn't close myself off just because she wasn't ready to open fully. I trusted timing without forcing it. I chose her knowing love doesn't always feel balanced in every moment. Some days one heart carries more, some days the other does. Commitment isn't about perfect symmetry, it's about willingness to hold when needed. She didn't know I chose her when I imagined a life that wasn't dramatic but honest, where conversations were real, where silence wasn't awkward, where love felt safe enough to be boring sometimes. I chose her by being intentional with my thug. HTS, by not letting fleeting attraction distract me, by reminding myself that depth grows where attention stays. I stayed. She didn't know I chose her in the way I believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. I never tried to convince her loudly. I just never doubted her quietly. I chose her because loving her aligned me with myself. It made me better without making me smaller. It didn't cost me my identity. It clarified it. She didn't know I chose her without expectations of reward. I wasn't waiting to be chosen back in the same way. Love given freely doesn't keep receipts, it just gives. I chose her in the unseen ways that don't make stories interesting but make relationships real. In showing up emotionally, in staying grounded, in being honest even when it wasn't impressive. She didn't know I chose her because my love was never about being recognized. It was about being true. And truth doesn't always announce itself, it simply remains.